Hey. Okay, so I'm gonna do the virus stuff in the beginning and get it over with, and then I'm gonna move on to more fun things. So I just want to know there's a bunch of stuff out there that's really good that came up today. Um, I don't know if any of you follow Coursera. It's Coursera. It's an online learning thing for college level. They sent out a thing today in email with a whole bunch of wonderful things. So they've got fact based information about COVID 19. They have additional resources. They have Learner Help Center. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compile all that stuff later today or when I'm done the video and post it up on my Facebook page so that people can find it. And I'll put it in the comments of the video as well. The basic gist is that they've compiled all the information and it's scholarly stuff. It's not like, random news stuff from, Weekly World News or whatever. So it's actually pretty good, and that's a good thing. I have coffee on my nose. I will say that officially, getting a full night's sleep is probably one of the best ways to combat depression, anxiety, and other ailments because I managed to get a full 7 hours last night uninterrupted. And wow, I feel so much better today. Yesterday, I was a little rough around the edges. You'll note I'm not actually downstairs today. I'm up in my room again, and that is because the grandson, uh, his dad was driving him over here, and they slid off the road and into a ditch. Nobody is hurt. Car is fine. They just got a little shaken up, and Dad was like, "Yeah, I'm done." He's taking a personal day, and they're just going to stay home and be cuddle buddies together. And I think that was an awesome choice, and it means that I can get a bunch of stuff done today. So there's that. What else did we have going on? I guess a lot of people are having internet problems right now, and so I'm glad I'm doing this on YouTube and not on Facebook because you'll be able to see it whenever you see it. So that's a good thing. And don't be afraid to pass these on. If you find something useful in it, pass it on to other people. And make comments. I love answering comments. I will answer things and happily, and I love that. So all right, enough to do with things that are uncomfortable. Everybody here is fine, and that's what counts. Everybody just take a deep breath because deep breaths are what keep us going. So I'm going to talk today about food because food is my happy place and food is love, and because I am guessing that with shortages out there, some of you may be looking at your cupboards and going, what the hell do I make with a can of beans that are, or dry beans? What do I do with these things? Well, I'm your girl. I work with, because I do the medieval recreation stuff, I do a lot of stuff with dried foods and things that don't come in cans because they didn't have that back then. And so when I'm practicing and when I'm putting on displays, I'm using the things that they would have used in the Middle Ages. Guess what? Those things all translate to food shortages really, really well. So if you go down in the grocery store, there are dried beans. Every grocery store still has dried beans. Everybody took the canned stuff, but nobody knows what to do with the ones that are in the bags. But you know what? It's 99 cents for a bag. That bag is 8 times as much as you get in your $2 can. And it's really easy to make, okay? So if you have dry beans, all you need to do is you need to soak them overnight. So before you go to bed, or even just after dinner, it's okay if they soak longer. Put them in a big container, like your biggest soup pot or a big bread bowl or something like that that holds water, and put the beans in and then fill it up with water. The beans are going to soak up the water, so it's going to fill it up. So if you do it after dinner, check before you go to bed to make sure it hasn't sucked up all the water. Add more water if you need. Let them soak overnight, okay? And then the next day, pour the water off, put fresh water in, In my household, when the kids were little, we called this rinsing out the farts. And you can tell your little ones that, or even your teenagers, because most of the time they find it amusing. And it's true. If you soak your beans twice before you boil them, a lot of the chemicals that cause people to have gas are actually removed or diluted. You don't get quite the intestinal distress as you normally would. So it makes your beans less musical. um, so yeah, soak them again until you're ready to use them, whether that's at dinner time or at lunchtime. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take them out, rinse them again, and then put them in a big cook pot, and you're going to boil them. Now, there are different ways of dealing with this. If you are boiling them to use in a soup or a stew or something like that, where they don't have to be, where they're going to cook further, you're only going to boil them until you pull them up with a slotted spoon and you blow on them and the skin's split. And it'll be really obvious. It sounds weird, but you'll still blow on them and they'll just peel. Okay. If you're going to cook them further, that's where you stop. Stick them in a colander, rinse them with cold water to stop the cooking process, and then use them however you would in soup or stew. If you want to cook them fully, continue to cook them on a rolling boil until they're soft and they feel right in your mouth. I highly recommend that you cook them in a sauce of some kind, though. So cook them until the skin's split, then drain them, and then pick your favorite sauce. Put them in barbecue sauce. Saute them up in a little bit of chicken broth and mash them and turn them into bean soup. I will at some point give you guys my recipe for making homemade baked beans, because not only is it a great protein, but it tastes like dessert. When you're really craving something sweet, but you want to be kind of moderately healthy, they're actually not too bad. They have a lot of sugar in them, but it's not bad. Sugar. So I went to the store on Monday to do our shopping and noticed that they do not have any brown sugar. They only had white. Now, we never buy white sugar around here. I usually buy cane sugar on the rare occasion that I actually use it. I tend to cook more with honey and stuff. But if you need brown sugar for a recipe and all you have is white, here's what you do. For every cup of sugar that you use, you add in about a tablespoon of molasses and then mix it really well. That's all brown sugar is. Really and truly, that is all brown sugar is. It's regular sugar with added molasses. So that's how you get it. And then you can, if you have leftovers, you can stick it in a baggie and it will last for months, as long as it doesn't get damp or eaten by something. I do that all the time because half the time I don't have any brown sugar on hand because I don't buy it. Bridget buys it. I don't buy it. So the other thing is that if something calls for brown sugar, you can use white sugar in its place. You can also use raw cane sugar in its place. And there are ways to use honey. I'm not going to give you the information right now because I don't actually know what the ratios are. But if you go online and type into Google substitute honey for brown sugar, it will tell you how much you need to use. So if you have other types of sugar, go for it. It's not going to kill your recipe, okay? And that leads me to bread. So I have a website with some of my medieval recipes on. So I'm going to give you that address. It's Allison's Kitchen, but it's spelled differently because it's my medieval name. So it's ALISOUNSKITCHEN.weebly.com. So that's ALISOUNSKITCHEN.weebly.com. Hey, I know sign language, some of it. So that has a bunch of my recipes on it. And some of them are fun, some of them are difficult. It's not I don't have a ton on there, but one thing I do have on there, which you guys might find useful, is something called the no knead bread recipe. So making bread, especially if you haven't done it before, it can be really daunting. It can be a little terrifying. And it took me a long time to kind of learn how to make bread. Now, I mean, this morning I was like, oh, I'm just going to whip up. So I just threw together 3 loaves. They're rising right now. So this recipe is the most forgiving recipe ever. And I will post a link to it again on my Facebook and in the comments here in YouTube so that you can see them. But basically, you need 3 cups of flour, about half a teaspoon of yeast, 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt, and 1.5 cups of hot water. And by hot, I don't mean boiling, but as hot as your tap will make it. Okay? You should be able to stick a finger in it without burning, but it should be pretty warm. What you do is you put the hot water in your mixing bowl, sprinkle the yeast on top. Don't just dump it in, because if you do, it kind of clumps. And then you'll watch it kind of spread out, and then just let it sit. It can sit for 5, even 10 minutes without a problem. And you'll start to smell it. It starts to smell really yeasty, and that's what you're waiting for. Then you add in your sugar. Well, pardon me, the sugar wasn't in there. You want to add in, if you're doing just white flour, you do not need the sugar. If you are using whole wheat flour or spelt or emmer or kemet or any of the strange wheats, then you need to add about like a teaspoon or so of sugar, because the yeasties don't like to eat the natural, so it doesn't make your bread fluff up as much. And if you want that fluff, you need to add in something to make it worthwhile for the yeasties to reproduce. Otherwise, they don't make enough air and your bread doesn't rise. Okay? So you put the sugar in, put the salt in. If you want to put in any herbs, you can do that too. Like sometimes I'll put in half a teaspoon of dried garlic or some dried onions, or I'll throw in some. If I'm making Indian food, I'll throw in some curry spice. You know, you can throw in oregano, rosemary, whatever you want. Dry things that are dried herbs go in at this point. If you have wet things like raisins and that kind of thing, they go in later. Okay. Then put in your flour. When I make it, I put in 1 cup of Better for Bread flour, which is really, really white, because the yeasties love it. And then I add in 2 cups of spelt flour. And this makes for a loaf that will rise nicely, but is still fairly dense, and it's extremely nutritious. And on top of all that, it has protein that your body can use. So you're sneaking protein into your kid's diet. So you throw all that in together, and then if you have a mix master, you can mix it just until it turns to a batter. It should be done with the paddle attachment. And if you're doing it by hand, you just mix it together with a wooden spoon, please, because wooden spoons are best. And once it's fully together, it will be very battery, kind of like almost like a cake mix. That's okay. Scrape the sides so that's all kind of puffed in the middle, and then just leave it. I usually put a plastic grocery bag over the top of mine, but you can use a damp towel, or you can put cling wrap. Doesn't really matter, even a plate. And then set the bowl off to the side. Anything that's not breezy. You don't want air going over the top of it, and you want it to be relatively warm. If you have a hard time finding that in your kitchen, put it inside the oven with just the light on. It actually makes it warm enough in there that it makes it a really good atmosphere for the bread to rise, but it doesn't cook it, which is what you're after. Alternatively, if you don't have a light in your oven, I don't, you can put it inside a cooler in your kitchen, and that will provide a draft-free place for it to sit, and it holds the moisture in, which is good. So you need to let it rise for at least 3 hours. So don't touch the bowl for 3 hours. But you can go as long as 5 or 6 hours if you have to. And if you need it to go longer than that, like if you want to mix it up the night before, don't do hot water, just do like the just the same temperature as you, body temperature water. But this is the most forgiving recipe. If you screw up, it will still be edible, I promise. So you just let it rise. It's going to look really bubbly. It's going to have a heavy yeast smell to it. And if you kind of jiggle the bowl, it wiggles, almost like Jello. It looks weird. Depending on what kind of flour you used, it might be more loose or more solid. Don't stress over it. Okay? You're going to use about a half a cup of flour on your counter. Just sort of sprinkle it evenly across it. Use a spatula or a wooden spoon, scrape the dough out onto the floured surface. Sprinkle more flour on top of the dough. Okay? And then I use a dough cutter, which looks like a big metal thing with a kind of curl on it for holding. But you can even use a spatula would be fine if you've got a big one. Or one of those flexible cutting mats. You can use that as well. And what you're going to do is you're going to scrape under one end, and then you're going to like scrape under and then flip it over. And then turn the dough, and then scrape and flip. And then turn it, scrape, and do that about 12 to 15 times. That's it. You don't even have to touch it with your hands, although if you want to, you can. No biggie. When that's done, you want to take a piece of parchment paper, not waxed paper. There's a difference. If you do not have parchment paper, clean the container that your dough is in thoroughly, and then oil the inside of it with either Crisco or olive oil. I like olive oil best, so that it's nice and slick. But if you have parchment paper, that's the best because it works great. So you line the bowl with parchment paper, put the dough in the bowl, cover it back up with your bag or your towel or whatever, and then let it rise for another half an hour to an hour. Preheat your oven in the meantime to 450 Fahrenheit, okay? You want the oven to sit at 450 for at least 10 minutes because what it does is it makes your oven temperature really even, and that's good. If you're going to be cooking, I like to cook this bread not as a loaf but as a round, and so I will cook it in a cast iron pot, but any oven safe pot is fine. If you don't have a regular oven safe pot but you have a crock pot, you can cook this in the crock pot but take the liner out and the ceramic part and put it in the oven, but don't put a lid on it, okay? Because the handle on those things will melt. Don't put the lid in the oven. But take whatever pot you're cooking it in and put it in to preheat with the oven. If you want to make sandwich bread, so square, so that it makes good sandwiches, you want to fold the parchment paper, and in this case, parchment paper is not just recommended, it's required. Oiling will not do. Your bread will stick and you'll be frustrated. But fold as best you can so that it sits neatly inside. Or if you're lucky enough to have been at the grocery store, they have parchment paper inserts that you can put into your bread pans, and that works really well too. I like those because I don't have to do any folding and they just pop in and then they pop out. You're done. Put the dough in there, let it rise, preheat your oven. Once everything is really heated, you're going to lift the dough and the parchment paper and put the whole thing into your pot, if that's how you're doing it, okay? If, on the other hand, you're not using that, you're doing the loaf pans, you're just going to slide the loaf pans into the oven. Don't do them in straight, do them on an angle. Don't ask me why. I don't know. It just bakes better. It's a thing. I don't know if it's real, but it's what I do. Okay? You are going to bake the bread for 25 to 30 minutes. When you open it, it should have it should be slightly browned on top. If it's not slightly browned, give it another 5 minutes, okay? And then if you have the parchment paper in here, this is where it's best. You're going to grab the parchment paper, and you can do that with bare hands because it's not hot. And you pull, and the bread will flip over. Leave it upside down. Put it back in the oven for another 5 to 10 minutes. And then you're going to take it out and you're going to knock on the bottom. And you want to hear what sounds like a really hollow sound. Okay, it shouldn't sound really dense. If it's dense, it's not fully baked yet. So put it back in. It may take as much as another 20 minutes. Okay, go in 5-minute increments because you don't want to burn your bread. If you're doing it in a loaf pan, you do the same thing. You're going to flip the bread so that the bottom is up. This helps it brown evenly and cook evenly. When it's done and you have that hollow sound when you knock on the bottom, you're going to take it out of the oven and you're going to put it on a wire rack. If you don't have a wire rack, you can sit it on your cool, okay, not hot, stovetop. I have a gas stove, so we have the metal grating over the top and I can sit it on there. But even if you have an electric one with the little spirals, that's okay to sit it on as well, just as long as it's not turned on, obviously. It's likely that you're going to chicken out and pull your bread out too early the first couple of times. Don't panic. As long as it's not totally wet inside, it's still completely edible. It just will taste better as toast than it does as bread. That's okay. You'll learn. Next time you'll let it go a little longer and you'll see how it goes. Unless it's like bursting into flame or black on the outside, you're pretty much guaranteed it's not overcooked. So you can take your time and do it. When you take that bread out, you have to let it cool for a minimum of 30 minutes before you cut it. Okay? I know it smells divine. Even your crappiest breads will smell divine, but don't pull it out until it cools. Don't cut it until it cools, because bread actually continues baking while it's on the counter. So the inside of your bread is going to continue to cook and finish. If you cut into it before then, the heat escapes and it doesn't finish cooking properly. So it's really important, even though it's really hard. I usually make 2 loaves minimum when I do this because everybody wants some when it first comes out of the oven. And so it will disappear and suddenly you'll be like, where the heck did my bread go? You can do all sorts of neat things with this. Usually what I'll do is I'll make like 1 loaf of cinnamon raisin bread and 1 loaf of just regular brown bread. And you can do the cinnamon raisin by, when you get to the folding part, sprinkle some raisins in there and fold them in, and then sprinkle it with cinnamon and a little bit of sugar and mix that in. And then when you go to put it in the loaf pan or in the pot, you just press a few raisins and stuff in the top. It's really tasty and it comes out really nice and it's fun, and you can get your kids involved and you can talk about how the fact, if you have little ones, bread is the most awesome experiment for science because you're eating yeast farts. I mean, really, seriously, what kid doesn't want to eat yeast farts? You can explain that yeast are living beings and that they're busy reproducing and doing things, and that's what makes that bubbly stuff, and that's what makes the air that goes into the bread that makes it fluffy. So there, now you know about beans and bread, and I have done my civic duty this week. I'm going to let you go because I need more coffee, and it's going to be a fun day. I got a lot of stuff to do, but I'm going to be back tomorrow. If there's a specific thing that you need to know how to cook and you don't know how, ask me. I've done an awful lot of cooking and I'm happy to teach stuff, and I can teach it online. I have no problems. I can even take this setup and bring it into the kitchen and show you stuff if that's what you guys want. But I need to know what you need because I don't know. I'm sort of out in left field here. I'm happy to cater to what people want to learn, and I will share recipes. Although I'm going to stick to sharing mostly modern recipes only because I have the cookbook coming out in a few weeks, and in theory at least, knock on wood. And so I don't want to share those recipes because I really want you to buy them. Which I know is kind of a crappy thing to say, but you know, everybody's working from home. This is my job and this is what I do. So this is what I'm trying to make my money at. But modern recipes, I will definitely share. I have some vegan recipes. I have vegetarian recipes. I have gluten-free recipes. I have allium-free recipes for those who can't do garlic or onions. I have dairy-free recipes because I can't eat dairy. I have all sorts of different things, and I'm happy to come up with stuff and teach you guys. It makes me happy. Food makes me happy. And since I can't be out there cooking for everybody the way that I normally do, I'm happy to do it here, and my family will not be the least bit upset if I'm feeding them the results of my teaching experiments. So I love you guys, and I will try and check in tomorrow. Bye.